位现场的贵宾、馆长、艺术家、各场次的主持人、与谈人，以及每一位喜爱艺术的朋友，大家午安。在我们论坛一开始，首先要邀请到主办单位代表来上台致辞，邀请大家以热烈的掌声来欢迎台北市立美术馆Li-Chen馆长，有请馆长。
大家午安，我谨代表台北市立美术馆，欢迎所有来参加2025台北双年展论坛的各位伙伴、各位来宾们。台北双年展一直是我们台北市立美术馆最重要的当代艺术展演之一，那同时也是国内外非常受到瞩目的一个重要的活动。自从1998年策办以来，今年已经进入第14届。那我们不只是在这个国内，希望能够以双年展来带领所有的讨论，对不起。同时，我们也希望让台湾的当代艺术可以纳入全球的这个体系。今年的台北双年展以地平线上的低吟为题目，我们邀请到 Tseng Where OK 在那里 Tseng 两位策展人，来共同策办了这次由国内外非常多艺术家以及北美馆的典藏共同共构起来的这次的双年展。那在双年展的这个重要的盛会时期，我们利用这个 weekend 2天的时间，来为各位办理了这个论坛。论坛呢，在这2天的中间，我们分别从第1天的归属、诗条、思慕，以及第2天的历史、观看、合作这6个不同的视角来切入讨论。这个展览里面以及台湾的这个多重历史政治下的一些共同的一个跟全球文化共同的一些现象与讨论，希望能够经由这个展览，也让这个现今世界以及台湾的处境可以被看到。2025年双年展也就在今天正式对外开放，欢迎各位嘉宾跟邀请好朋友们来参观这一次的双年展。我们这次双年展也分为3个楼层，根据很多已经看过双年展预展的朋友告诉我们，其实来1趟可能不够，好，所以请各位要多留一些时间，可能来个2、3趟，一起仔细的观看这次非常丰富的双年展的内容。那最后，我要再次谢谢来到这个论坛的各位朋友们，在这个 weekend 2天的时间来参与这次非常有意义的活动，谢谢大家。
好，我们热烈掌声，谢谢Li-Chen馆长的致辞。And now moving on, let us invite the 2 curators of Taipei Biennial 2025, Bardaouil and Fellrath, to deliver the introductory remarks for the forum. 接下来我们邀请到本届双年展的2位策展人，为我们带来开场引言，掌声有请。
Hello, very warm welcome to this symposium. Thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. And first of all, I would like to extend a very warm thank you to the team at TFAM for organizing it. You've done such a fantastic job. Everything is so professionally done and printed and organized and hospitality. So I hope you can come and organize a symposium at Hamburger Bahnhof soon. So I would like to just emphasize one quick thing before Sam gives a few opening remarks as well. One of the things that really I think is very important in this biennial, and this is in fact for many art exhibitions and all projects, is this element of gathering, of coming together, of meeting one another, forming new friendships, exchanging ideas. And that does not only happen amongst the artist community. Really, the exhibition and the conversations are only complete when we talk about the public, when we talk about the audience, when we talk about all of you and engage in these conversations. So we very much hope that you take this opportunity to form connections, bridges, friendships across the world, across disciplines, across ages, across all kind of boundaries, and enjoy these conversations over the next 2 days. Thank you so much once again, and we're so excited to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Till, for the very short remarks, which gives me more time, basically. First of all, again, I would like to thank everybody who allowed us to get to this point in time, starting with the artists who accepted our invitation and have been working very hard for perhaps even more than 1 year now, a year and a half, since we started thinking about this biennial. And of course, the exhibition, the biennial, could not have happened without the dedication and hard work of everyone from the TFAM team that has, put every single effort to make sure that things get executed to the most perfect level, and they have succeeded. So thank you very, very much. I also would like to thank all the supporters that made it possible for us to dream big and do these beautiful installations and bring some of the special artworks from literally all over the world to be able to share them with you here today. There are several considerations that were very clear to us from the very, very beginning of when we started to conceive this edition of the Taipei Biennial. We wanted an exhibition that did not speak about Taiwan. We wanted an exhibition that speaks with Taiwan. And I think there's a very, very thin line between the two. It was very clear for us from the very beginning, even though we've been coming to Taipei and Taiwan since 2014, and over the years have managed to develop so many beautiful friendships, connections, and have learned so many, many things. Yet, we are clearly not from here, and it's not our position to speak about things, but we wanted to talk with the context and try together to rethink some of the things that we know and perhaps imagine new possibilities for things that could come if we were to gather around the artworks and engage in an open and critical, sometimes, conversation. So the first thing that we wanted to do is to embed the biennial in its local context, meaning TFAM's collection. This is a very, very special opportunity to do a biennial that is embedded in a collecting institution and think about the theme not only in a geographically expansive manner, but also in a temporal way that digs deep in time and brings out incidents, examples, ideas that circulated probably 100 years ago, but are still relevant to the considerations and questions that we have today. And this resulted in a selection of around 35 works by almost 20 artists from TFAM's collection, which are not at all conceived as archival moments in the show, but as living artworks that have the same agency they had when they were created, almost some of them 100 years ago. That is the first consideration. The second consideration was to take a universal theme and find an expression that resonates through local tools, through local metaphors. And one of the many, many incidents that had shaped our thinking about the biennial and helped us arrive to the actual theme of yearning is a story that we encountered in the so many periods of research and types of research that we actually engaged in over the last 2 years, which is the story of an exhibition that took place at the National Palace Museum around 2010-2011. The title of the exhibition was Landscape Reunited. And in that exhibition, there was an attempt to bring together two pieces of a landscape scroll painting. A major part of the piece had arrived to Taipei at the end of the Second World War, when the nationalists came from mainland China, and it entered into the collection of the NPM. And a small piece of the painting stayed behind on mainland China. And this was the first time that the two pieces were brought together. But when they were placed together, they clearly showed the tear and wear of time, the fact that they were stored in different conditions, different condition climates, a little broken, a little torn, and they could never become one thing, although they were very, very much trying hard to connect. These connections had become very difficult to reconcile, although it was very, very important to try and give a new life to that painting. And this is something that made us ask a question: what pushes us to keep on trying to fix something when obviously it can never be the same? And how can we find a new meaning for these things, a new life for these things, instead of trying to force them to perform something that has long gone? And that's where the idea of yearning started coming to our mind. Yearning as this desire that pulls us forward to achieve, to do, to rethink, to be, to connect with other people, to hold on to a lost memory, to imagine a different future, to rethink the way we live and operate in this world. Yet, like the horizon, sometimes that yearning keeps on slipping away from between our fingers. We think that the horizon is achievable, but as you all know, when you get closer to the horizon, it keeps on moving away from you. And on the way, you start hearing all these sounds, all these whispers, the whispers that perhaps are too soft and are very, very easily lost in the noise of the world, in the loudness of the things that surround us, in the bombardment of images and sounds. And this is where the invitation to you, to this biennial, is to perhaps slow down and focus on these whispers that otherwise might be very, very easily lost. Because it's perhaps these whispers that are somehow more important than the loudness of the world. And it's perhaps these whispers that will save us someday from everything else that is happening around us. And it's perhaps this journey towards the horizon that allows us to find ourselves. This distance in between that ambition and that drive and that impossibility that lies ahead. That process of yearning and searching is exactly what we are hoping that we dwell in over the next 5 months when this exhibition is on view. I'm speaking too much perhaps, and I'm worried that Till is getting bored. Do we have 2 more minutes to finish our remarks?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I think it's important that perhaps we get to the point where how does that kind of relate to some of the fundamental conceptual departure points that were actually very important in us framing the exhibition and creating a structure for the visitors to be able to follow. And this was an integral part of our research. I think one of the things that we take very seriously in every project that we do in our curatorial approach is this process of active and deep listening. We never would like to create an exhibition that's about our ideas, what we are excited about. Of course, ultimately it becomes a little bit like that, but first and foremost, it is super, super important that everything that we do is echoing the voices, the stakeholders, the people who are truly engaged in this community, in this place, in this land, and not the questions that perhaps are only relevant to somewhere else. And this led us on a process of deep research, looking at so many things. I'm not going to tell you everything that we've looked at, but 3 things stayed with us. A very special object, a puppet from the life of Li-Chen, the puppet master, as he has been immortalized in the film of Shao-Chien, the Puppet Master from 1993, which we had seen before, the Trilogy of Sadness, a lot of films of this wonderful filmmaker from Taiwan. You have an incredible film industry here that has given so much to the world. And what really struck us about this film, about that story, is this artist's devotion to an art form that was stable despite all the changes that were happening around him. This is an artist who experienced the Japanese colonial period, the Second World War, the arrival of the mainland Chinese, the change into a military rule, the opening up of the country, the modernization, and the only stable thing for this man was this puppet, this traditional art form that allowed him to hold on to something that he considered his own genuine identity. That yearning to find your voice, your place in a world that is constantly evolving. The second point of departure for us was a very heartbreaking, although beautiful short story by Chen Yingzhen, my kid brother Shao-Chien. And I have to apologize for massacring all the Chinese names. Please, please forgive me. The story is a very, very troubling story, yet sobering story, about a young man who is trying to find his place in the world and simply could not do that because the world was too fast for him. And at one point when he couldn't reconcile the idealism of youth with the disillusionment of the world, he decides to take his own life. And the story starts with his sister reading his biography, his diary. And that diary became a voice of those who get left behind, who cannot cope with change. And the last object is the stolen bicycle from Wu Mingyi, who's joining us later today. The stolen bicycle, and a man trying to find the stolen bicycle of his father, thinking that if he manages to do so, he will find his missing father. I will not tell you what happens, you have to read the novel, so the sales of the novel go higher and Wu Mingyi will be very happy. But what I want to say is the story becomes a meditation on family and on belonging, the yearning again for connection, for deep human connection. And these are the 3 departure points that framed the biennial, that shaped our understanding of so many complex issues and allowed us to put out an exhibition that we hope will resonate locally and globally, through conversations, through metaphor, through the language of art and poetry. Thank you very much for being with us here today.
欢迎大家来参加这个论坛的第1个场次。那我是曾Shao-Chien，非常的荣幸受到北美馆的邀请，来主持这个归属如何安住于之间的场次。那首先呢，我简单的介绍一下这个场次的艺术家，他们是出生于1950年代到1990年代的中东、欧洲、俄罗斯。好，那因为政治战乱或者是家族迁移的问题和原因，他们离开了祖先的故乡，来到新的国度生活和创作。那他们的生命轨迹其实一直不断的和地缘政治和族群认同不断的协商，他们的创作也因为磨难和压迫的经验，散发非常饱满的生命力，还有强烈的感染力。那接下来让我简单的介绍每一位艺术家。Mona Hatoum，这位艺术家是出生于黎巴嫩的巴勒斯坦家庭。他在23岁旅游于伦敦的时候，因为爆发黎巴嫩的内战，就没办法回到了家乡。那目前他是在伦敦和柏林2个地方居住。他的雕塑装置带有超现实的诡异神秘，还有低线主义的简极冷静，细致非常细致的表现政权的控制、个体的反抗，还有自由的渴望。那第2位艺术家是Ivana Jermolaewa，他是来自苏联时代的列宁格勒。那在年轻的时候，因为从事反对党的运动，被调查起诉。到目前是没有办法回到俄罗斯，所以在1989年逃亡到奥地利，寻求了政治的庇护。那他的观念艺术涵盖了摄影、录像、识得物、装置，十分的关注人权和言论自由的问题。那近期他也成立了难民救助的组织，支持乌克兰。那第3位艺术家是Ivana Bašić，那他是在纽约，可是他带着关于南斯拉夫的战争的创伤，还有宗教艺术的记忆，来到布鲁克林和纽约，学习哲学和人类学之后呢，他现在是专职在布鲁克林工作。他富有震撼力的雕塑装置，融合了科幻恐怖片般的这个元素，而且呢，它让我们激发关于后人类的身体想象， 还可以听到他自己温暖的生命的气息在他的动态雕塑当中，他让我们可以思索精神还有物质之间不断的拉扯和搏斗。那第4位艺术家是 Kiriakos Tompolidis， 他是来自于德国的艺术家，不过他的祖父母是从希腊到德国的鲁尔区工作，所以这位艺术家是移民的第3代，他探索的是战后的家族迁移历程，还有他个人的性别和宗教的多重认同。他以非常典雅的摄影转印、油画，还有拼贴，还有陶艺，铺成居家的亲密的氛围，而且交织出文化传统还有个人渴望之间的张力。好，那接下来呢，我想从2个层面，一个是生平经验的角度，好，另外一个是美学，还有材料方面的角度，来请艺术家分享这次双年展的作品。那第一个就是想请大家来谈一谈，对于艺术家而言，迁徙和流亡的经验，还有多元文化的身份认同，在创作之中扮演什么角色，发挥了什么作用，或是说这样子的经验其实并没有真的浮现在创作之中，可以自由的发言。那当你们在一个陌生的国家重新安顿还有适应生活的时候，你们是如何在新的家园建立还有连结社群呢？还是说完全也没有跟新的地点的当地的观众产生对话？好，我想这些都是非常自由开放的问题，请艺术家在这次展出的作品中跟我们分享你个人的经验。那我们先请 Mona 好吗？
I was born in Beirut, which is in Lebanon, but I'm not Lebanese because I was born in a Palestinian family, and like a lot of the Palestinians who ended up in Lebanon in 1948, they were never able to become citizens of Lebanon. So my father ended up getting a British naturalization for the whole family because he worked at the British embassy. It's a bit complicated, but in fact, every time people ask me about my background, I say, do you want where I come from? I say, do you want recent or original? Because if you have half an hour, I'll tell you about the original. Now, I won't go on for half an hour, don't worry. Anyway, so the story is that I had a British passport since I was born. A lot of contradictions in our status as Palestinians who are supposed to be temporary unwelcome guests in Lebanon and awaiting return, which never happened. So that's why people were not allowed to integrate. And so in other words, since I was born, there was no sense of belonging in that family or that country, although it is really the country and the place that I worship as my home, and the only one that I really identify with as home. And anyway, afterwards, in 1975, I went to London for what was supposed to be a very short trip, like a week or 10 days. And I ended up being stranded in London, which was not too difficult for me because I held the British passport, so I was able to work immediately and support myself and see myself through art school, at least for the first 4 years. And then I was very lucky to get even government grants and somehow managed to scrape through and educate myself in art, which is something that I had wanted to do since I was a child, but I was not allowed by my parents because they wanted me to do something that would help me support myself. And anyway, sorry, I'm going into a funny direction. I mean, I want to say that, of course, biographical kind of and personal experiences actually shapes the way we view the world. So inevitably it comes into the work. But in my case, often if there is anything autobiographical that was coming in was very unconscious, because I kept trying to work in such a way that I make situations or installations or sculptures that are kind of open enough to invite any number of people to kind of identify or read some aspect of their own experience into it. So I never wanted my work to illustrate my story in any way. And but the funny thing is, despite that, I always suffered from people wanting to only interpret my work in relation to my geographical background. So even if I was making, so even if I was trying to make statements about something I have encountered in Britain, for instance, it was always associated with my background, and sort of denying the fact that I could be making comments on the dominant narrative that is around us where we live in the new culture. So anyway, I don't know where else to go here. There's a lot to say, and I don't know what to say other than this.
谢谢莫娜的回答。就是这里面有谈到，关于生平的经验，其实是常常用非常潜意识或无意识的方式，很不经意的浮现在作品中，所以其实也很难一对一的去描绘，就是用作品去描绘出自己的真正的生命的旅程。那这个其实我觉得是他的作品，打开很多解读和诠释的空间，而不是只限于生平的元素。好，那谢谢。那我们是不是请第二位Anna可以为我们来分享？谢谢。
Hello, can you hear me? Hi. So, yeah, I tell a little bit about my biography. So I was born in Leningrad. It's now St. Petersburg, in Soviet Union, former Soviet Union. I was involved in dissident movement when I was quite young, and this caused also the fact that I had to leave Soviet Union as political refugee. So we were, me and my husband back then, we were co-founder of the first oppositional party in Soviet Union, and we also were publishing a Samizdat newspaper for 1.5 years, and every second Saturday we came with a new issue for over 1.5 years, and then KGB started to interrogate us, and house search and interrogations of over 300 people in Leningrad. So we had to leave the country, and then through, like, also I tell now a short story because several work of mine also refers to this experience also as a refugee. So I went, we could escape to Poland, and in Poland the woman we didn't know even, she organized and helped us to go to Austria. It was, first we wanted to go to West Berlin. It was my 89, and it didn't work out, so she helped us and paid for our journey to, and this is how I find myself in Vienna. Then I had months of like I started on the bench for a week, and like really classical. Like then I landed in the refugee camp and was for several months waiting for political asylum. So this also shaped me a lot, and I also coming back to this experience in my work sometimes, but also not because I want to maybe tell my story, but I just went through it, and maybe if I, for example, did some work about this experience, I maybe want more raise empathy for the people who having the status of migrants who so I had we see here also, we saw here some works in Venue Biennial I showed last year, also this telephone booths from this biggest refugee camp in Treskirchen in Austria, in Treskirchen, and it's so people could use it. Now we see here also work. You can see I like telephones and telephone booths, and maybe because also, as you know, in Matrix you can escape Matrix only if you go to telephone booths. So what else? So yeah, I came. Yeah, and since even I am in Austria now since over 35 years. I feel really this 18 years I spent in Soviet Union shaped me very much, I have to say, and also this experience as refugee. It's also also being around these people for several years, meeting people from all over the world who try to for different reasons came to Austria. It was extremely big lesson for me, and also inspiration. How to kind of access the new society, right? It was also the question, yeah. So how to in the new society in Austria, it was I had quite a hard start, and I started actually as cleaning woman, and then I was applying for 5 years for Academy of Fine Art, and that wasn't being accepted. So it also shaped me. So yeah, this. But it's. I remember, I always thinking about this topic and how much you adjust yourself to this new society. And there are two kind of almost anecdotes I want to tell you maybe. So the one is when I was in this refugee camp, there was another couple from Soviet Union, and we were sitting there and they were dreaming about it. Can you imagine? You know, this there is this scientist saying that. After 7 years, every cell of your body will be replaced. So, can you imagine? In 7 years, we don't have any Soviet cells in our bodies. So they were looking forward to it. So, and I was thinking, do I want it? Kind of, yeah. So, and another extreme, another extreme is again. Soviet immigrant in Brighton Beach, that's just this area, almost ghetto in next to New York. There are another anecdote. There's the Russians coming into the store and they speak Russian and they don't understand. On the counter, the woman don't understand them, and they are so embarrassed that we are here already since 8 years, and she still didn't learn Russian. So I think there's this, the truth is somewhere in between, two extremes. Either completely, get completely, get rid of your past and became complete, like Austrian in my case, or just ignore the new society. So I think the truth is somewhere in between.
那谢谢安娜跟我们分享她关于政治庇护之后，然后协助难民的一些故事。好，那我们现在请Ivana。
Yeah, so I think for me, in order to sort of understand, I would say, my practice and my quest, it's important to understand the sort of landscape in which I grew up. And I would say it kind of splits into two sections, one being the sort of utopia and then the other one being the collapse. And so, the idea of Yugoslavia, which is where I was born, was this really powerful thing, which was basically to unite all these nations and all these sort of different cultures under this idea of the Yugoslavian identity. And it's interesting, because these nations were in war with each other some 10 years before, and, fascist forces, killed like 500,000 Serbians. And then Tito, the president, came and he was like, no, now we're going to be one country. Now we're going to all sort of let go of all of our individual trauma and individual pain and sort of drown the subjective for the sake of collective. And it's really interesting because the potency of that idea and the kind of resonance it had was really tremendous, and the fact that it did kind of succeed, and it was really beautiful in that it was trying to overcome the sort of subjective experience and really reaching for this wholeness, for this unity that I feel like we all so deeply want and desire on really all levels of our life and existence. And so I think the Yugoslavia at that time, while Yugoslavia was at its full strength, was definitely the golden age of Balkans. And I think in the memories of, my parents and our, grandparents, everybody just remembers it with so much joy and so much melancholy. And even now, when you go to anywhere in Balkans, the only music you will hear is ex-Yugoslavian music. So I feel like everybody, the country was flourishing, the culture was flourishing, and this idea of letting go of one's own pain really did work, and it created this like really beautiful utopia. And then, some like almost 30 years later, after, and the problem is that effectively all that pain and trauma from the sort of Second World War and all the earlier conflicts was never really processed. It was only sort of disguised under this new idea and this desire that everybody clearly had to overcome one's own pain. And all of that sort of resurfaced when the president died, and then effectively the collapse started, and all that unprocessed trauma turned into violence, and it ended up in one of the bloodiest wars. And I would say, when I was born, it was the beginning of the collapse and the beginning of that shadow that followed this golden age. And so, when I was born, the Civil War was in 1992, and that in itself was just, I would say the collapse was, both material and ideological and spiritual. I really felt as I was growing up that every single aspect of material reality was like collapsing around me, the culture, the nation, the currency, the economy, like absolutely everything. And that is a very strange, very intense thing to live through, because you feel like reality cannot hold you anymore. Like everything is shivering and about to sort of break. And in 1992, my mother's family is from Dalmatia, they were Serbians in Croatia, and they were from this village Golubic. And so my grandmother was exiled together with all the refugees, and we found her on the highway walking with all the people. They lost everything, and just the trauma of all of that has just been sort of going and running through our life, and plus all the sort of unprocessed trauma from the Second World War, and then the bombing of 1999 during the Kosovo War. I was 13 at the time then, and I would say this collapse, which was sort of happening at those moments when you're 13 and you're sitting in the shelters, for 78 days. And I unfortunately was living in a public housing next to the military airport, which was bombed more than 20 times a day. And I think something really happens to you there when you so early on understand that you're contained in matter, yet you're not just matter, yet you're doomed to the fate of matter. I would say something happens that you cannot really reverse after that. And for me, it was this acute need to escape, to find a way out, because the next point of collapse is your body, is yourself. There is no anywhere further to go. And I think for me, this just created this sort of obsession, this like need to find a way out somehow, to be able to transgress the limitations of the body, the limitations of the matter, this thing I felt like I was contained in. and needed to find a way out. And so I would say that for me, this is really what defined my life and what defined my sort of artistic quest. It became this obsession to try to find a way out, and I would say through my work, there is this sort of deep yearning for this freedom that for me feels like cannot be reached within the realm of this material world, as it feels like all we are doing is sort of hitting into the boundaries and reaching for something larger.
好，谢谢Ivana 给我们这么多就是个人经历很多战争以及他家族在很多困境当中处理这个创伤的过程。那就是艺术如何在协助个人在打开或者是寻求一种解放。我觉得我们下一回的那个问题，我们可以再进一步的来探索。那我们接下来是请Kiriakos 来为我们讲几句话，关于你的迁移或者是你们德国移民家庭的经验，如何跟你的创作有一些连结。
It's working, right? Yeah. First of all my respect, because I was born in Germany. I'm German Greek, so maybe the meaning of adopting or like between spaces is a little bit different. And my grandparents, actually, they came in the 50s, the late 50s to Germany. So my parents were also born in Germany, which makes me third generation. But my parents, when I was born, they needed to work a lot. My dad tried to study and work while I was born. So I grew up a lot with my mom and with my grandma, like also in Greece. So I would say we have a very, can I say proud? I don't know, proud, strong Greek bond. And I grew up like with two schools, like German and Greek. And that's why the Greek culture, the Greek heritage stayed until now. I would say also my mom is the only one in the family actually who found a Greek man. Like all my cousins, if you see a family portrait, you think like I'm adopted. Everyone is blonde. And then it's like my family. And yeah, what was I about to say? Okay. The thing with belonging is that I was struggling a lot in my childhood. Like I wanted to be German so bad, even physically looking like them. Because the thing with my family is that it's sad, but they got this kind of loser mentality. Like the small person, you come to Germany as a guest. My dad tried to study again, as I said, and when I was born, he didn't have time, he quit the study, so he stayed with his job. So they always thought like, we small people, we can make it anywhere. Like it was even a hard fight to study art. Even right now, they don't know what I'm doing. They're like, I'm doing something with art and I'm in Taipei. Like, they still have this mentality. And even me, I need to get rid of this thought that I'm a small person, even in regards to the Germans. Like, being different meant trouble for my family. So they told me, like, you need to speak very good German, you need the best education, be as much as German as possible so you fit in. And yeah, I was always like, I don't know, I felt like it was a lie when I was saying I'm totally German, and also I'm not totally Greek. If I'm in Greece and talking to my cousins, I'm like, okay, that's a different level. I'm not that Greek. But what is very interesting right now, to the topic of belonging, I moved to Mexico City, and I'm living there since a year. Before I lived in Berlin for 7 years. And this is very funny. Like, physically, if I can say so, I blend in better, so they think I'm Latino sometimes. The people, they get it, they ask me where I'm from, and I don't know what to say. I'm like, okay, it's a little bit what you said when they ask you. I'm like, okay, if I mention both, like, they will not get it, or like I need to explain myself 10 minutes. And if I just mention one side, it feels like a lie. But the time was passing, and now, I don't know, it kind of a sense of peace set in, that I feel like it's kind of a blessing right now, because I was always fighting against it. Like, I need to be German, or then I was too German in Greece, then I tried to be more Greek. And in Mexico, I learned like that it's a gift, like that you, for example, I feel like the Latin culture or the Mexican culture is very Mediterranean in some ways, or Greek, I don't want to say something wrong, but for me it's very Greek. So for me, I could easily adopt with the Mexican culture, because it was like, yeah, I know this from my Greek family. And now I feel like as long as you're good with yourself, how can I say it? As long as you know that you belong to yourself, you got your own bag, you can belong to the world. Like, you can belong anywhere. And I feel the meaning of belonging is a concept of temporarily and changes. Like right now, maybe I belong in Mexico. Maybe next year, I want to become fully Greek and I move to Greece. Yeah, these are my thoughts about it.
Thank you. 好，谢谢。就是我们第一轮的那个分享呢，就是大家有谈到这种比较流动的身份认同，然后还有没有固定的那个居所的概念，其实是一个正面的刺激，就让他们可以更自由，然后更回到创作本身。所以我们第二个想要请问的问题就是关于在艺术跟所谓的安住，今天我们的场次叫做安住，那其实它是一个建造还有思考的动态过程，那经常是游移在未来的想象或者是过去的回忆之中。那可是我们回到艺术创作呢，其实它非常重视的是劳动、手作，好，还有材质，还有技术的运用。那究竟就是你要采取或是选择什么样子的文化遗产去重新活化它呢？还是说你想要去扬弃和批判某个传统？那我们现在想要好奇请教的是说，艺术家在心目中有没有任何先驱或者是一个典范，让你的艺术实践其实产生最大的启发？那或是说反过来讲，有没有什么样的艺术意识形态或者是规范是你想要挣脱的，你想要去挑战，你想要逃离的？那我们是不是可以回到创作上，然后来让大家能够了解你的艺术的思维，还有美学的观念？谢谢。那我们还是请莫娜开始好吗？
I'm not sure why I can't seem to relate to these questions for a moment. Anyway, in terms of aesthetics or the line of work that I've gone into myself since I started making installation and sculpture has been kind of going into maybe a more opaque and ambiguous way of working, in the sense that I want to convey the content or the meaning or the sensation that comes out of my work through the materials and through the abstraction and maybe even the phenomenology of those materials, rather than speak in very precise terms and talk in kind of very clear narrative. So I use sort of, say I'd give an example of my work here, which uses cages. It's something that's recurring in my work. And of course, a cage is a symbol of incarceration, prison, but also I wanted it to be as a kind of metaphorical thing about generally kind of restrictions that are put on us by society, by the state, and all the kind of religion, all the things that seem to be besieging us and trying to limit our freedom, and our yearning for freedom is part of it. Anyway, so in this case, of course, I'm using cages in my installation here. It's called cellule, which means cells in French, and in English it means both a cell as a prison cell and a space of restriction of movement, but also cells as in the biological, part of the body, the smallest component of the body. So in this case, it's a very strange way how I came up with this idea, and it was something to do with being in Istanbul, trying to work out a piece for Arthur, for a show I was having there in 2012, I think. Anyway, and going around about a year earlier just to pick up some ideas of the place, the flavor of the place. And I kept hearing sort of snippets of conversations about earthquakes. And that somehow connected me with my own experience of earthquake when I was a kid, which was like, because of course our proximity with Istanbul meant that we were often getting the kind of, what do you call it, the aftermath of the what do you call it? The tremors that that originated in Istanbul, but ended up in Lebanon. And I remember one being very, very strong, and it was in 1958. Now I'm showing my age, when I was like 6 years old. And it was a huge trauma for me, sort of suddenly experiencing the whole house moving and shaking, and then we had to run out into the street. So I sort of connected with this idea, and I created these structures which look like they're about to topple. They're not very straight. So on the one hand, it was about thinking about buildings where people could be trapped inside and yearning to get out and trying to push themselves through those impossible barriers. But at the same time, it could also look like the the body itself as a cage, and some kind of creatures or bodily organs kind of, you know, trying to escape out of them, or also, you know, the things being more like a, you know, a landscape which is, you know, being destroyed or unstable, the instability of it all. So it's something that, I mean, when you look at it, you never think about my own background, but it's partly there, but it's also trying to be much more open so that it can be viewed as, you know, anything that somebody else might have experienced, whether in situations of war or destruction or earthquakes.
Thank you, Mona. Then we will ask Anna to answer the question for us.
Okay. Yeah, about my aesthetics and materials, I also can maybe take as example, a good example, my work here. This is like this 3 telephones on each floor one, which are connected. So if you have a chance, you can use them. It's like, it's just if you get on air, so and somebody else is in another floor, so you can talk to each other, and maybe later also even go for a coffee together or something. Yeah. So and this is I refer in this work, and also like it's also maybe also really characteristic for my how I work. It's also like I'm referred to this cultural memory of Soviet Union, and it was very like in Leningrad where I grew up, and exactly the time I was like 16 or something, and also I use these telephones a lot. It's like these public telephones, and in this case it's originals objects. I find them and. So I use this like kind of ready-made object here, and what I want to tell is a story. There is a fascinating story which like in Leningrad and like between early 80s and early 90s, the telephone system allowed, like through this era, people kind of outsmarted this system and find a way. Like there were some certain numbers. If you know the number, you can call, and you land in kind of chat room. Like hundreds of people could talk to each other. It was before internet. It was like actually first social network, I would say. So then, when they digitalized the system, it's already it's gone, and like the authorities tried always to cut it. So soon, but people find another numbers, and so these people, yeah. So it's kind of first. Conference room or chat room in the history maybe. And this was this yearning for communication and without any censorship, and people were anonymous and could speak truly free, and and also since people were like on air for hours. Of course, you can do it if you have like parents at home, or like if you're in communal flat, you have like 5 other families in the same flat to share and one telephone. So people used mostly public telephone, like this ones which you see here, and to be able to because like to use it for free, they developed this like they find a way like this coin on string. So they did a little hole in the two kopeka coins, and then they could put it in, and then like after 2 hours take it out and go home without paying anything. So it's really also I find it super interesting because I also work with this since why also this 18 years growing up in Soviet Union also like really shaped me, and also like grew up in this so under censorship, in the society under censorship, it shapes skills, and I find it very different, in generally interesting. It's not only one work referring to this how you outsmart the system, you know, like in this case it's like this also this coins is maybe symbol for this on-air people, and actually they really indeed they also sometimes there are some relations, like there are some families, people like met online, like online, on air, and then every Saturday at the train station Finlyanski Vokzal, there was like they also had they could meet and they realized each other. So there is coin on. Was kind of so they belong, like the sign they belong together, and this is how it worked. So it was very smart, and this codes, you know, like this codes under censorship also like was big topic in my in my pavilion in Venice last year, because for example this I find it fascinating that like in Soviet Union Western music was completely forbidden, but people still wanted to hear music, you know, like Beatles, etc. But you couldn't buy it somewhere. But some kind of few maybe vinyls came different ways into the country, and actually exactly in Leningrad some engineers find a way to copy the vinyls with Western use, and how they actually stole old X-rays from the hospitals, and on X-rays they printed the Beatles, etc. You know, like, and on the black market you could buy one, you could go to prison with this, but but it calls like Musik und Bonds. Yeah, another way like how to be smart in this under censorship, you know, like and another work also in Venice I showed. It's also like there is this, and unfortunately it's still relevant work. I did it together with my Ukrainian colleague. We rehearsal Swan Lake. You know, Swan Lake is most political ballet of all times. Why? Because if you saw in Soviet Union ballet in loop for days on TV, it meant the boss died. Like, it happened to me 3 times. When Brezhnev died, Andropov died, and Chernenko died, I saw ballet for days in TV in loop. And it became also a code. So if you see ballet in the TV, it means meaning that the change of the system. Yeah, and during the putsch of '91, it was played also 3 days in loop. So it became a code. And never, if you say I want to see Swan Lake in TV, means it's you want Putin go. Yeah, and I did this work together with my Ukrainian colleague who is choreographer and ballet dancer. But and everybody in the post-Soviet like territories, like could read this code, you know.
好，那谢谢安娜帮我们分享，就是关于那个免费电话，还有新闻审查的这个环境哦，还有关于那个天鹅湖是一个秘密的密码，哈，就是好像要改朝换代的这个所有公民都知道的事情。好，那我们请Ivana，谢谢。
Yes, so I think in terms of the sort of material strategies and some of the thinking behind the process, I would say for me this idea of the kind of inevitable dissolution of the body and dissolution of the matter, you know, that will to come. I'm through my work trying to look at it not as a moment of loss, but as a moment of potential, as a moment for the possibility of re-envisioning what a human is and what it can be, and humanity as such, and where are the limits really. And this entails to look at humanity in this more sort of holistic lens, for me looking at it as a full cycle, sort of coming from the ethereal realm, taking on the embodied state, and then sort of returning back into the ethereal. So really looking at the whole cycle and looking at the sort of radical transformation that this cycle entails upon our bodies, upon our beings, spirits, and all of that. And so I would say for me, some of the things, you know, that I'm thinking about in relationship to the kind of work I make, I think one of the particularities about my work is the sort of non-normative bodies that I would say, you know, in the beginning when I started making work, people thought they were quite sort of grotesque and morbid and whatnot. I think for me, I always had this kind of expanded idea of what a body is or could be. And I think for me, every point of deformation of the body is the sort of intentional point of liberation from materiality and from its constraints. So it is there for a sort of particular reason. So the bodies are reduced or expanded, but they're sort of pushing against the norm, pushing against the expectation. I think another thing that I really think about is the sort of the realism in my work, which, you know, I use as a kind of methodology that renders the work not as an art object, but almost as a proxy of a possible reality. So for me, it is extremely important that there are no artist gestures on the work. Because for me, when you see the artist gesture, that always points to the artist as the origin. And I don't feel like I'm the origin of the work. I feel like I'm letting it through. So I don't want you to think about me when you look at the work. I want you to take the work as if it is real, just as you are, as if it is almost uncreated. And this is the thing that takes quite a lot of time with the kind of fragile materials that I work with. And so I would say these are some of the things that are kind of really important to me, that the work becomes a proxy of these realities, because this is kind of how I feel like the world is. And the way I work with the materials and my process as a whole really entails some of these, I would say, radical material transformations. So in my practice, I have this particular symbolic material language that I utilize across and that is consistent throughout my practice. So you can sort of start to read the work through the materials. So for example, I always use wax to represent the flesh, the sort of mortal matter, because wax comes from paraffin. Paraffin comes from fossils and from the soil. So material is narrating what is going to happen to the body, that it is going to return back into the soil. I use glass to represent the breath. It is a material that is formed through the force of breath, through the blowing itself. It's also one of the most fragile materials, so the kind of fragility of life is represented in the material itself. I use stainless steel. Stainless steel is a material, you know, that doesn't oxidize, it doesn't corrode, it is atemporal as opposed to the body that is temporal. So in that way, for me, it represents this forces of sort of life and death that act upon us, that act upon the body, and it is always in relationship to the body that is that of both support and violence. And so I feel like these forces that act upon us that are both life-giving and that will eventually dissolve us, that is kind of how the stainless steel is in relation to the body in my work. And then there is stone, which is there for me to represent this sort of cycle of matter under pressure, and for me really thinking about the idea of life as slowly succumbing to the pressure of these forces, and thinking about breath that is contained within the cavities, within our body, and slowly throughout life, under pressure, this breath is being pushed out, and in the moment of death, this final breath is pushed out, the cavities are collapsed, and under pressure, we are sort of returned back into the soil. Under more pressure, we are being compressed into the stone, and under more pressure, reduced into dust. And so, representing this sort of cycle of matter and this reduction until you reach the point of irreducible, which is the dust itself. So, and the whole sort of universe of dust is something I have been really fascinated with for a couple of years now, thinking about dust as this sort of anonymous substance that inherently contains the world, since everything in the world could be reduced to dust, that effectively makes dust the composite of everything that exists, and thinking about dust as this anonymous substance, since origin of each individual particle is inherently unknowable. Then if you think about the body's reduction into dust and body's creation from the dust, you're really thinking about creation of the alien, and not from without, but from within, from the substance itself and its sort of unknowable nature. And I think for me, this really hones into this idea that, if you go deep enough into any substance or deep enough into origin of the being, you will reach this point of the unknown. And that point inserts kind of endless potential into our understanding of what human is and what it can be. And that is actually there within the substance itself, and that is really like exhilarating point for me. And then I used bronze also to represent the sort of protective strategies of the being, almost like an armor that my beings coat themselves while they're undergoing this slow process of transformation that is quite radical. And so I would say that, the way I work with these materials, which are each so complicated and so very labor intensive, and some of them very fragile, they require quite a lot of care, quite a lot of negotiation and kind of dialogue with them, and each of them carry their own truth. So I think for me it is really not to sort of impose my truth onto them, but to understand what is already within them and to let that speak and inform the work, and that makes the process kind of very slow and very contemplative. And so, yeah, I would say that these are kind of some of the strategies that I work with. And I would say also another thing that is, quite interesting, I would say that people oftentimes think that my work is made, through all sorts of technological means, but I actually work quite manually. I work in clay. I sculpt everything by hand. And, for me, this process of being in clay is this vast open space, which can take anywhere from, 1 month up to 15 months, spending just in clay, not for the sake of the actual labor it takes, but for the sake of being in this space where I'm sort of trying to bypass my ego and bypass the sort of world around me and tip into this like other sphere, which feels like endless and which will sort of allow all these beings to seep into this dimension. And that process is very open, and it is my favorite part of really creation. And it's really interesting because I can't really enforce or foresee how long that will take. And it can take so long, but then sometimes when they appear in clay, they will just appear within a day, and it is wild because it feels like almost they have already been here just on the other side, and I had kind of let them in. And so for me, it's really this idea of, and I think this is also interesting because I often hear people saying like, oh, the work feels like it is both ancient and of the future. And I think this sort of slow contemplative process of making the work, where I sort of try to bypass my own subjectivity and tip into this bigger space. I feel like in that space, both past and present and future are all there, and I think the work is really tipping into all of them, and that's what it sort of ends up being.
Thank you. 好，谢谢 Ivana 的分享，非常详尽解说她对于那些物质材料的思考。那我们接下来请 Kiriakos 谈一下对于你的那个艺术的观念，或者是你材料和形式的运用。谢谢。
Okay, I saw something with the Q&A, so I'm going to be fast. Yeah, I'm dealing with the Greek and German heritage. I mean, well, right now my room in the Biennial is like Greek culture full in your face. But like normally I would say, yeah, it's about memories. Like I have two processes, like painting, of course. But before, like for months, sometimes for years, I'm collecting fabric, tiles, is it right? Tiles, tapestry, or objects I know from my childhood or like from my memory in general, and I'm taking photos, and then I'm using them as a photo transfer. Like sometimes I'm scanning or like scanning the images on the canvas, or sometimes I use photo transfer, and then I have this kind of sort of collage. Because when I started this collage, like with this photo transfer 6-7 years ago, kinda, I want to show my memory, but stronger than just painting. Like I want to show the people what I saw, the object, or like the patterns. And that's how I start like taking the photos and then printing them, and of course manipulate them with painting, so you can't tell 100% if it's just like printed. But yeah, that's what I would say about it.
好，那因为最后的时间不多，那我们现在开放就是观众提出的一个问题，我们想要请问这题目每个都非常的丰富，非常的多，有关于台湾的，也有关于个别艺术家的，然后有关于成长经验的，也有关于当前局势的。所以我现在要选择最后一题好了啊，艺术家们是不是可以同步翻译嘛？哈，艺术家们与他者的相遇，是不是也在这个过程当中意识到自己处在某种主流之外的他者，就是自己是不是也变成了他者？那这样子的经验，如何转化成艺术创作的动力？那同时也想询问艺术家，除了个人内在的创作之外，有没有参与任何公共的行动、集体的行动？这是这个问题。那有没有艺术家要回应这个部分？就是关于自我跟他者有没有这个角色上的转换？就是艺术家是不是也变成了一个他者？那还有就是说，艺术家除了个人的创作之外，是不是也参与了一些公共的行动？这个是观众的问题。
I can answer to the part of that question. Yeah, this idea of othering. Yeah, I would say that, as I was saying a bit ago, for me, this idea of the other or the kind of otherness is really like the fact of it is, I feel like, baked so deep within our being, within this sort of unknowable nature of the substance itself we are made of, the nature of our existence, like all these conditions that we are part of that we don't know anything about, and this big unknown deep within us sort of renders this otherness right there. And so the idea of othering others for me, yeah, it is never something that felt like really made sense. I guess what I'm looking for is the sort of common humanity in us all, and I feel like really looking into that levels all of us, which is this sort of human condition and you know, this temporality of our existence and the sort of the life and the death and these really fundamental things we are all coping with. And I think for me that is something that really kind of erases all of these differences that are seemingly there, but I feel like are mostly a construct rather than the reality of, or the things that carry the most gravity. And so for me, it's really important to sort of bypass that surface and dig deep in order to find that common ground, which is, I feel like, the same for all of us, and that is where all the sort of beauty and the potential and the mystery of it lies. So yeah, I think that is. And then in terms of this public activism, yeah, I think I feel like I have spent majority of my early years and really up until I left Serbia just in protests. That was like all the memories I have of my youth. It was just, we were hanging out in protests like all the time, protesting something, the enemy on the outside, the enemy on the inside, like everything. And so I feel like there was just this feeling of fatigue or exhaustion of sort of fighting and seeing no result. And I think this is kind of what happened in Serbia, people sort of just losing hope and retreating within what they can do for themselves and their own lives, which is, sad for the level of society, but kind of left as the only thing to do when these forces seem too big and too dark to really cope with. So I would say that I felt like I was also really drowning in this heavily political situation. There was no space for reflection, no space for anything but this kind of bare existence, and this is why I left the country as well. And I now feel like the way I contribute is through my work and trying to really kind of process that reality, that heritage, and to give that back as something that I'm able to contribute.
Maybe I can answer a second part of the question about social engagement. Actually, yeah, a few years ago, we some political refugees from different countries in Austria. We came together and started a kind of society, I don't know, we all kind of already a long time in Austria went through this process of and establish ourselves in different there was journalists from Chechnya and doctor from Afghanistan and whatever. I'm artist and teacher and so on, and we came together and started kind of this union or whatever, and to actually to be there for the new migrants and to support them with our networks, with our advice, etc. So, but right after this, full invasion of Ukraine started, and we immediately focus on supporting and helping Ukrainian refugees. Yeah, and besides this, we also this way spontaneously right after full invasion, we in different once with my husband, once with another couple, we twice I went to the border and we brought actually all together 33 Ukrainian refugees, and yeah, and trying to do whatever we can, because we have this. I have this experience to. That is not easy.
好，谢谢两位艺术家的回应观众的问题。那最后就是小小的作结哦，因为归属这个场次其实会让我们想到，到底是哪里是一个可以安住，然后还是哪里可以变成自己去争取自由的地方。那就很像爱德华扎伊德在1999年的回忆录所讲的 out of place 这种格格不入，还有不和谐音这样子的感觉，其实常常会在生命的旅程当中出现。那我认为这次4位艺术家他们就是以艺术形式的转化的力量，去深刻剖析他自我的一些格格不入或是社会的疏离的现象，然后追寻文化上的、性别上的，或是甚至跨物种上的归属，甚至新生的可能，还有解放的未来。 那谢谢大家今天的参与，谢谢。那我们期待第2场的开始。
好，那我们热烈掌声，谢谢曾教授，还有我们4位艺术家的语谈。